So hi everyone, today I would be giving you some information on Scrum and its best practices. So to start off, a gist on what is Scrum. Most of us, we would have been already working in a Scrum environment, but here is a little information on Scrum. So Scrum is also known as a stand-up meeting where Scrum helps agile teams to connect with each other on a daily basis for minimum of 15 minutes in order to complete sprint tasks and sprint goals ultimately. So according to the Scrum Guide, this is what Scrum is. Scrum helps to optimize the probability that the development team will meet the sprint goal. So the goal is always to increase the probability of achieving the sprint goal by the development team. So if you look into the Scrum framework, not every organization's Scrum method would be the same. It might vary. For example, the timings might vary, the number of members might vary, the location would vary, but the main common guideline that every organization follows is the Scrum Guidelines. So here are some of the guidelines. Always the Scrum has to be kept within the duration of 15 minutes, minimum 15 minutes. It must never, exceed for a longer time. Always maintain same locations and timings to avoid confusions. So the best practice is to keep a common timing where everyone will be aware of the timing and the location to which they need to report to. Also, teams should inspect and validate what is completed and what will be completed. So no matter which time or which location you're conducting the Scrum, always every Scrum team of every organization would inspect and validate and see what has been completed and what needs to be completed when comparing it with the sprint backlog. The next one is compare it with a sprint backlog and goal to check if teams is progressing and on the right track. So as I said, based on the tasks that have been completed and yet to be completed, the sprint backlog is validated, and based on that you would be able to calculate the progress in which the team is moving in. So these are the few guidelines that will be followed commonly by every organization's Scrum team. The only thing, as I said, which varies is the time duration, the venue, the team members, etc. But all these guidelines are common and followed everywhere. So here are some of the do's and don'ts when you're conducting and when you're being involved in a Scrum. So moving on first to the do's, you always have to answer the three questions, which is what has been done, what has to be done, are you facing any issues? So always mention what you have completed, what has been done, what has to be done, and in case you're facing any issues and problems which is actually blocking you from completing a task or slowing down your work, then you need to report those particular issues that you're facing to the team. The next one is listen carefully to problems and solutions. So when you listen carefully to problems and solutions, either you would be prepared to deliver certain solutions to the problems others are facing, or in case you might also be facing the same issue to which someone might be explaining the solution. So at that time you always need to pay attention to what is being said, because every information that's being conveyed during a Scrum is valuable to everyone. Next one is have a Scrum board or a Kanban board for project tracking. So it's usually the Scrum Master who should have this, which will have the Scrum, the sprint backlog tasks, issues, etc. So when you have a Kanban board, as you can see here, a Kanban board actually consists of different lanes which represent the status of tasks or entities. So you would have, basically these are the three lanes that you would have yet to start, in progress, and completed, but you can always customize your Kanban board for separate lanes. So having this Kanban board, every Scrum you would be able to push and move items that are being completed and yet to start, or yet and also in progress. You would be able to switch it to the respective lanes. Therefore you would gain a lot of visibility into the current status of your sprint, and also multiple stakeholders would also have a real-time visibility of the sprint status. The next one is catch up with your team members after the Scrum for clarifications. So A scrum meeting always has to be very quick. It needs to answer, you need to answer all these questions, and that's it. It should never move on to anything else that's different. So in case you have certain clarifications or doubts with regards to what has been mentioned in the scrum, or on regards to what a particular member had mentioned and you were not able to follow up, at that time you should always feel free to go and meet up with that person after the scrum meeting and get your doubts and thoughts clarified. So always don't stick to only the scrum meeting, but also be flexible and be agile to go back to the member and have a one-on-one conversation and a meeting and get your doubts clarified. Moving on to the don'ts. So the very first don't is, do not perform micromanagement during Scrum. This goes in for the team leaders, the team representatives. It can be the Scrum master, or it can even be certain stakeholders who might be involved in the Scrum. So to all these roles, if you're one of those roles, then don't take up this Scrum event as an opportunity to do micromanagement on certain employees. So that's not the rule of Scrum. The very objective of Scrum is to understand what's everyone's tasks that they have in hand, what has been completed, and if there's any issues. Not more than that regarding their work, their performance, etc. So the very first point to keep in mind is, do not take that up as a platform to do micromanagement. The second one is, goes for everyone. Do not be late to Scrum meetings. Since Scrum meetings are 15 minutes or maybe a little bit more than that, and it only takes place at a particular period of time, and of course everyone leaves their work and just comes for this catch up meeting, stand up meeting in order to update the team. Everyone's time is valuable, so you don't want anyone waiting for you for a long time. So always make sure that you are on time for the Scrum meetings. The next point is, do not talk things that are not necessary, talk to the point. So as I said, it's always good to mention what you have done, what is in progress, and if there are any issues that you're facing. So always make sure you stick to these questions and answer only these questions, or if it's very necessary, talk to the point. Else do not divert or do not deviate any conversation. The next one is, do not run Scrum meetings into planning, discussion, review meetings, etc. So the Scrum meeting's main goal is, as I said, to understand the pace that everyone is on in and on what page they are, and in order to understand and estimate the progress of your sprint. So it's always not a good idea to start planning items maybe for the next sprint, planning items for backlogs, etc., or starting any discussion that's out of the Scrum call, any personal one-on-one discussions, or trying to review any feature or any other functionality or anyone's work. This should always be eliminated. Scrum meetings are not meant for that. So if at all you want to plan for something, or you need to discuss on certain matters or on certain functionalities, or if you need to review anyone's task, then you need to set up separate meetings for that, and do not take the opportunity of Scrum in order to complete those meetings. The next one is, avoid personal conflicts. So this Scrum meeting here that happens every day, it's not a place where you play the blame game. In case there is any conflict or issues that you're facing, and it might be due to certain other employees' dependent tasks, etc., always try to convey it in a good manner rather than creating confusion, misunderstandings, or even ultimately speaking in a way that leads to arguments. So these are very bad practices during Scrum meetings to have this kind of behavior. So it's always good to avoid personal conflicts during Scrum meetings. You always need to make sure that whatever information you're sharing in a Scrum meeting should be beneficial to the entire team and not to single members or targeting single members. The next one is, as I said, avoid personal conversations, one-on-one discussions. So you always need to convey information that is beneficial to everyone, and not just you taking up the spotlight and trying to convey information to another person in specific. The next one is, do not delay Scrum meetings for a long duration. So let's say due to certain unexpected circumstances, you were not able to conduct a Scrum meeting. So it's always good to conduct the meeting the very next day, which probably takes place every day. So do not procrastinate or do not postpone these meetings, because ultimately at one point of time you would lose track of what the team is working on and what is the progress of the sprint. The last one is, do not wait for the scrum to raise issues and concerns. Let's say you're facing an issue in a task, or you're having certain situations where there are blockers or impediments. At that time, do not wait for the next day's scrum or stand up meeting in order to convey this information. So you can go immediately and you can convey this to your team members or the concerned person. So do not take up the Scrum meeting as the only place where you should convey all this type of information. Of course, you would convey information if it has occurred recently, but do not wait for Scrum, because time is precious and you cannot wait a whole day in order to convey this information. So it's always good to convey information then and there, and also have face-to-face or in communication protocols which would help you to finish your task on time. So these are the general do's and don'ts in your scrum. So we have been attending scrums many times, and maybe we would have been using it for the wrong purpose, or we would have been not following certain guidelines of the scrum, and it would have been something different. But now with these little do's and don'ts, keep in mind what you have to do and what you do not have to do, and then I think the scrum meeting would go on well for every organization and team. So that's it for this video. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe to this channel, and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.